doula. So we're talking about entrances and the exits. So doing this series is like part of my training on the subject. And here we go. Welcome to Sesa Suban, Sacred Conversations in Ancestral Transition and Spiritual Evolution. This series explores how death functions in our inner and outer worlds and provides space for otherwise unwelcome expressions. So I am Mama Tarian, and I am joined by Dr. Baba Kapense Chike. And before we get started, I just wanted to say, I mentioned earlier about my 9-year-old self wanting to learn how to understand death the way the Africans did. The Africans that I was referring to would be the Nubians, the Kemites, the Dogon, the Akan, all people, all cultures that I got to know about in part, and really mainly because of Baba Kapense, because of getting to spend time and learn from you at a pretty early age. So I just wanted to point that out. So in my frenzy of wanting to make sure that I can give a coherent introduction, I did go to the interwebs and type in Dr. Kapense Chike, and I was reminded that yes, you are a doctor, yes, you are a professor at Wayne State University, and you teach Africana or African American studies there. But I met you as a young teacher, a young percussionist, folklorist, and you actually started teaching Africana Studies, African Studies at Aisha Shule, Affirmative School for Gifted Children, where I was cultivated. And so I got to have Africana Studies. I got to learn about all of these questions and concepts, and even approaching the study of African people throughout the world. What do we call the study? What is it for? What is the historical basis? Locally in Detroit and also abroad. So there was so much that I got to be privy to that a lot of people don't come across until they're college students themselves. So I just wanted to express gratitude and acknowledgement for that. Another short story. And then I'm going to ask you to fill in some of the blanks with your introduction. You took us to Temple University to meet Dr. Molefi Asante, and he asked if we knew who Harriet Tubman was. And we looked at him and we looked at you. And of course we were like, yes, we know who Harriet Tubman is, and, said, whatever it was about the great general. But that was just one of those moments where it was almost kind of like an inside nod, like, yeah, we know a little bit about this stuff. We literally had his textbook in your class. So that was interesting. So I'm going to stop babbling. I could go on, but I want to ask you to fill in a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I think you said the bulk of it. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. And it's flattering to me as a teacher, and I think any teacher, when a former student gives accolades, people in the teaching profession gives accolades to their teachers, excuse me. But I think in the teacher profession, being a teacher, the gratification can be delayed, particularly if you're a teacher, well, I would say of all ages, because oftentimes students don't realize the value of what they've learned until they've evolved. So, but I want to thank you and the other young people and Mommy Imani for seeing the teacher in me, which I think was my calling. But the students, you and other students, helped me to understand what my role was as an educator. And so you helped me to evolve as a teacher as well. And I think the learning and teaching process is ongoing. I started teaching at Aisha Shule. I started there teaching African drumming. And I'd like to thank Sundiata for my introduction to African drumming in a formal sense. And for a significant portion of the time while I was teaching there, I did not have a degree, but I was a student of Africana Studies at Wayne State. Drumming introduced me to a wealth of knowledge and information. And when I finished my undergraduate degree, Mommy Imani asked me if I would teach social studies. So that was pretty much my formal introduction to teaching. I think I started formally teaching social studies to ninth graders and some maybe sixth through ninth grade or something like that. And my desire to teach was driven by something. I've been a member of the Shrine of the Black Madonna for a very long time, but very important part of the program of the Shrine, at least back during that time, was there were major efforts to kind of teach our children and separate them in a way so they wouldn't have the contamination that the adults had from the aftermath of enslavement and oppression. So we wanted to teach the children so that they could be further along in the process of being conscious and aware. So an African-centered school for me became the perfect place to do that. And I began to realize, you may not have asked for all this, so I hope I'm not going on too much, that in African-centered education, you're trying to impart not just content material like reading, math, science, but also a counterculture. So being African, what it meant to be African, all of that, it was a major part of the curriculum. And I say that to say, oftentimes, as a teacher, I saw a struggle between parents and what the school was trying to teach because the parents were not always necessarily on board. So I felt like at times we were doing a push and pull, a kind of tug of war with the children because we were trying to impart the values of a counterculture. And sometimes parents weren't on board. So that kind of compelled me to move from, well, maybe if I teach the children, they'll be better adults than we are. But when I saw this tug of war, I was compelled, or I began to think maybe if I taught college or young adults who would be parents, then I could impact those prospective parents in ways that they would be able to be more impactful on their children, because I think parents have way more influence on their children than teachers do, or maybe I should say had, because this was pre-social media and smartphones and these things that tend to distract us from being focused. So that's kind of an overview of the impetus for what led me into teaching.
Agreed. So I definitely see where the influences definitely are changing, but either way, we have to know what those influences are. And we did get to be in sort of an immersed environment, a culturally immersed environment, so that whatever the influences were, including the ones coming from home, or if it's coming from the screen, we can still kind of maintain that kind of strategy where during this time within this space, you are immersed in the cultural understandings that we intend to impart. So I appreciate you saying that. And it's, again, been such an honor to watch you grow up.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you. Especially seeing you go from, I can't remember the exact year, that we first encountered each other as teacher and student, but now seeing you as a mother is also, as a parent, maybe close, and parenting a child now, I think you said your daughter is 9, uh, that's maybe close to the age that you were when we met each other at Aisha Shule. So, but what
Yes.
this is about, at least for me, and I think many others that engage in the kind of work that we do, that try to give their lives and live a lifestyle that's conducive of liberating our people and transforming us. One of the most valuable uh, things is when subsequent generations, those people that we teach in the younger generations, our children, come along and they've embraced similar values and things like that. So because our experience in from enslavement to the post-enslavement era, which includes, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, era of mass incarceration, and all of this has been a protracted struggle. So as I've aged, and I think other people, as you age, you realize that the work has to occur across generations. So when you're younger, or when I was younger, it was like, the nation is going to be built by the time I'm 30. And that's just, as we get age and see how deep or ingrained the damage is, you begin to realize it's an intergenerational struggle. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I did have that dawn on me pretty recently. And because I said, oh, I thought we fixed that. Like I was under the impression that deprogramming had been successful because it was in my bubble, or at least I felt that way. And I realized, oh, we have to do this for every generation, because every generation is actively being programmed. Even though the strategy might change, it's actively happening for every generation. That is the intention. So we have to actively be ready in each generation. So that's an interesting thing. So somewhere along the way in your journey, you came across the Akan history and culture, and what you gained from that has become part of our communities, again, like our cultural immersion. So can you talk about how you started to get involved in Akan culture? And we're actually here specifically to talk about the Akan traditions of honoring the ancestors, and also something about their burial practices and ancestor veneration. So just to lump it all in Akan culture, how is death understood and what happens spiritually when a person transitions? But first, how did you come across
Well,
this?
my exposure, introduction to the Akan I would say, was a part of a spiritual evolution. As I mentioned before, I've been in the Shrine of the Black Madonna for, I think, 45 years now. I'm not as active as I was. I gained a lot of things there. The church has changed in a lot of different ways. But I think the spiritual orientation I gained in the shrine helped prepare me for understanding of traditional African religion. So the founder, Reverend Clay Jeramogi Baby Ajiman, at some point began to posit the idea that God was cosmic energy and creative intelligence. And for me, that's all the energy in the universe. So with that very basic understanding, I began to, along with studying, began to understand aspects of traditional African religion. I think prior to becoming exposed to the Akan, I had some exposure to Ifa and Orisha through Sundiata Keita and some other people. And at some point, I felt I was kind of called to that particular system. But when I left Detroit in 1996, going to school at Temple, what I saw in Philly, I spent a lot of time, I was living in Philly, I spent a lot of time in DC and New York. And unlike Detroit, the various traditional spiritual systems, Ifa, particularly Ifa and the Akan, were very prevalent in the cultural community, whereas in Detroit, they seem to be, I don't even know of an Akan community in Detroit. There was some degree of people dealing with the Orisha and Ifa in Detroit, but it was almost like it was a secret. It was hush hush. And it was just blatant. In Philly, you would see young people, teenagers, young adults with ilekes on, African clothes. You would see there were instances where bimbes, different spiritual ceremonies were advertised on flyers and things like that. So it wasn't something that people were concealed. It was blatant. And in addition to that, I have an auntie that's a couple years younger than me. We kind of grew up like siblings. She lived in DC, so I spent a lot of time in DC, and she was involved in the Akan. So my early introduction to the Akan was through Nation House, which you may remember, Watoto Shule in DC, and I began attending their ceremonies. And my aunt would eventually become an Akonfo, which is a priest in the Akan religion, and I would go to the ceremonies I called Akoms. And one time when I was at an Akoma, deity literally called me out and told me I needed to make a choice. I had been on the fence trying to decide, and when that message came unprovoked or unsolicited, it became clear to me that I needed to decide to do something. So I am not a priest, but I did took the various steps to become a practitioner of the Akan religion as it manifests in the United States. And the Akan religion was introduced through Nana Denny Zulu. I forget the year. I want to say it's in the 60s. I can't remember it exactly. The interesting thing about Nana Denny Zulu is, along with being an Akan, he went to Ghana to a place called Larte, which is right outside of Accra. And he was visiting there, and a reading was done, and they told him that he was the person who needed to bring the shrines from Ghana to the United States. And he did that. But another important thing about Nana Dinizulu is that he has the oldest, this African drum and dance company is still in existence today. So it said that he has the drum and dance company that he established, I think in the 60s, is the longest ongoing African drum and dance company. And they still exist today. Of course, he's an ancestor now, but that's kind of the basis of how I got introduced to the Akan.
Wow. So you leave the block basically, like you didn't stay within landlocked within the city of Detroit or within our 6 block radius. You just stepped outside and looked around a little bit, and things were a lot different. I wasn't even aware of, I never even thought about the comparison. And yes, I think in Detroit, we were sort of closeted. Everything was, I hate to say closeted, but everything was very mysterious. Um,
Mysterious, kind of hush hush, because, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but even my exposure to the drum and dance communities in those places were very different. So in Detroit, uh, I would guess, and I've been involved in the African drum and dance community for many years, as you know. But I have never known many people in our African drum and dance community that also practice the various related spiritual systems attached to the various art forms that we do. probably, and now I have to say that might be a little separate when you get into like Santeria and things like that, which is probably more prevalent in the Hispanic communities or historically was. But here, we go to drum class and dance class, and we may not even have a spiritual orientation to that particular tradition. And what I found in DC, definitely in New York and in Philly, like I mentioned, Nana Denny Zulu's dance company, they did Ghanaian dance, but they also practiced the Akan religion. So
Right.
for me, it was a more complete picture, if that makes sense. There's
Yeah.
traditional spiritual systems, like I would think probably the most popular traditional African dance in Detroit is Senegalese, Mali, the
Senegambian
drum and
region.
dance that
Yeah,
surrounds the
for
folklore
sure.
of the djembe, but I don't think many of us even know the traditional spiritual practice associated with that culture. Whereas in these other places, I saw that. So for me, it took drum and dance out of the context of being something that you maybe did on Thursday night, like you go bowling, you go to dance class, whereas I saw people living a whole lifestyle that the drum and dance was central to their lifestyle.
Okay. I can see that as I'm coming up. So I thank you for that. So that really takes me down a whole different rabbit hole. I did want to focus on the Akan burial traditions, but we need to revisit that for sure.
Well, I'm sorry for cutting you off. Go ahead.
No, no, please go ahead.
Well, I like the idea of revisiting it because I would like to be a little more grounded to be able to answer some of the questions. But going to the one of the prevailing questions, the concept of death and dying. In most African spiritual systems, or I should say in many, the idea of death is that it's a continuum of life. So we're taught Western thought promotes this kind of linear idea of life and death. You're born, you live, you die. That's it. African spirituality, African cosmology teaches us that death is as much of a part of our existence as is life. And in fact, when you die, particularly with the Akan, the next evolution, or it is an evolution which would elevate you to an ancestor. So you go to a higher form of existence, and there's relationship between ancestors who are in the spirit realm and those of us that are living in the physical realm. And this is a part of our I would say continued existence. So we're born, but we come from somewhere. So we come here from the spirit realm. We're born, we go through various rites, and the final rites as a living physical person is to become an ancestor. Let me ask you to hold for just a minute. I'm doing a recording here. I don't know how much of that you heard, but hopefully you can edit it out.
Not a problem.
Anyhow,
The magic of the internet.
so um so yeah, but interestingly, this is to me, and I want to back up to what we talked about, this intergenerational struggle and how the movement we're involved in to liberate ourselves, to elevate our people, to de-traumatize ourselves, to heal. To me, it connects if the struggle is intergenerational, then the idea that my life here during the lifetime I have as a physical being, and then that I have an existence beyond this connects me to all of the people that came before me. Harriet Tubman, you mentioned, Marcus Garvey and others. If I see the struggle as intergenerational, then my time here is a part of my assignment, if you will, for lack of a better word. But I'm a continuum of those that preceded me. And
Yes.
as you know, and many people may be viewing this, when we come have gatherings, we acknowledge the ancestors, we invoke their spirit and their energy. So it to me is consistent with this idea of our life and death and our existence as a continuum, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
definitely our continued evolution. There's something that you say, invoke at the end of pouring libations, once the ancestors are venerated. You talk about those who have yet to return, and you say, I don't want to try to, I'm not going to try to paraphrase, but what is it that you say at the end, in reference to the ones that we're inviting back?
If I'm understanding, if I'm gathering what you're asking me, I invite those spirits that are returning to bring about positive change, cultural restoration, re-Africanization, and the building of nationhood and sovereignty for African people everywhere.
Those who are coming back with a specific purpose that we need, as we continue our efforts. So,
Yes.
what are some more of the practices, such as the rites or the pouring of libations?
Well, the funeral rites, which I had, is IE, and that's spelled AYIE, and that's really it's a it's a funeral, and there's a 7-day process where the family comes together and they will do all the things necessary to welcome people that may be coming, and there's an actual funeral held on the 6th or 7th day. I can't remember for sure, but then there's also a 40-day rites. And part of tradition teaches that when we transition and go to the ancestor realm, there's a place where the ancestors reside called the land of Insamundo. And this 40 days is the time period that we're journeying from having transitioned to going to be with the other ancestors. So it's like a journey, and sometimes they may make offerings or present things, maybe our favorite food or things like that, that are designed to assist us on the journey to be with the ancestors. But it, unlike how we may conceptualize heaven, the Judeo-Christian thing teaches us that we die and go to heaven, and we have milk and honey and all that. There's a relationship between the spirit realm and the physical realm. And Marimba Ani talks about this in her book, Let the Circle Be Unbroken, which she contextualized as a reciprocal relationship. So those in the physical, by venerating the spirit of our ancestors, we are connected to them to hear, know, and learn what things they may want of us while we're in the physical realm. And in a similar fashion, by pouring libation, making offerings, presenting ancestral food and things like that, we can petition them to work for us in the spirit realm as well.
Okay. What are some everyday, ordinary ways in which we might participate in cultivating those relationships that we may not be aware of?
Well, one thing you can do is create an ancestral altar in your house that you go to, and the altar, it should be, the purpose is to be a point of mediation or intermediary, or a way to commune with the ancestors. And on the altar, and altars can be done in different ways. Different systems have different traditional altars, but you can make an ancestral altar, and you should maybe spend some time there. In the Akan, in terms of the way I was taught, there's 3 days that you are required to pour libation, and that's Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday. I can't explain why. I think Sunday for me may be, there's a term called Kwesi Ada, which is the day, no, let me back up and say Krada. Krada
Yes.
is the day that you were born. So I was born on Sunday. In the Akan tradition, everyone takes a name that reflects the day of the week that they were born in a similar fashion. And I don't want to reduce this to astrology, but there is this idea that if you were born on Sunday or whatever day you were born, there's certain attributes about you that are specific to people that were born on that day. So for me, and I think this may be for a kind period in terms of the orientation I have, that Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday, and I can't explain why, but those were the days that I was instructed that I should pour libations. You can also prepare ancestral food. There are sources that can provide recipes for what that particular food may look like. But another way that you can do it if you're not necessarily formally in a particular system is if you're trying to venerate the spirit of some particular family ancestor. If you can offer something that you know they liked. So for example, at Adasi, where we do part of what we have a whole ceremony that focuses on ancestor veneration with a primary focus, and I think this may get lost sometime because the primary focus of Adasi was the ancestors that died in the Middle Passage, but we made
Specifically.
inclusive to all of our ancestors. But what I
Yes.
try to do every year is have one of particular food that was the favorite food of my mother, my grandfather, and my grandmother. So that's an example, and you can put offerings on your altar weekly or daily or however you choose to do that. So, and then pouring libations on a regular basis. Those are two of the main things that I think people should incorporate in their daily lives. Now, some of the questions you had sent me, a challenge for me has been there's no Akan community in Detroit. So when I went to the Akan, which is a ceremony, we had an Akan at Imani Humphrey Hall last June as part of our 25th anniversary of Adasi. I had people, affiliated with Onipa Bushwill, which is in New York, which is an organization that was created by two of the former wives of Nana Dini Zulu, but I was able to have them come here and facilitate that particular ceremony. In the Akom ceremony, similar to a Bembe, drums are played, libations are poured, dances are done, and people get possessed by the various deities that are part of the Akan spiritual system. And of course, well, I shouldn't say of course, but these deities usually are invoked and they bring messages from the spirit realm.
Feels like, of course, but I know what you mean.
Say that
Um,
again?
I said that feels like an of course, but and not necessarily can't take that for granted.
Right, because
Um,
anybody could be watching this, so I don't ever want to assume that people know.
Fair, right? But that is maybe the expectation. So this 40-day time period, and I do want you to talk more about how Adasi seems to have evolved. But I just want to bring up that 40-day time period. When Mama Sumara was making her transition, she made it clear that she didn't want to have any type of celebration or ceremony until after she had completed her 40-day journey. And that was directly coming from what you shared and taught her about that tradition, that particular tradition coming from the Akan. And I think since then, there have been other celebrations that have adhered to that as well. What is the significance in having this knowledge in creating new traditions for us?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned in creating new traditions. I think as we seek to reconstruct various traditions, as African people here, we do have the ability to create or to create rituals and practices that are specific to who we are.
Yeah, to fit our culture. We have a very specific culture right here, right now, in this time and in this space. And back to Mama Samara again, she was a person who was very much into improvisation, into intuition, and for creating things for her life and her children's lives and those around her that fit into the culture that we have created here and now.
Yes,
Kind of
and I think that I lost my train of thought, but we have to see, like, if you see a person pouring libation or making an offering or doing whatever it is that the actual act is, that's just one level of that thing. And I think our orientation does not teach us to look beneath the surface. So if I'm pouring libation, that's a physical act, but there's some intentionality that maybe you can't see. I can speak what my intention is, but the linguists and some psychologists say that culture, there's deep surface, deep structured culture, and surface level culture. So, for example, a dance would be considered material culture. This is a physical thing that you can see, but it emanates from the spirit and or the ethos of a people. So if I say I'm doing an Orisha dance, there's the actual physical act of doing it, but it begins with from the spiritual place, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I feel like I've gotten away from the question, but so we have to look our Western orientation teaches us to look at what's happening physically. But if we go back to this idea of the reciprocal relationship between the physical and the spiritual, even everything that exists in the physical world it started before it became a physical thing, if that makes sense. Or maybe I can explain it this way. A drum carver can look at a tree, or any artist can look at whatever medium, they can look at a tree, a clump of clay, or whatever, and the idea of what this tree can become starts in the carver's mind. So it is not a drum until it manifests as a result of what he's done. So the deep structure is the concept that emerged within the context of the drum carver's spirit before it manifests as a physical thing. And I think
it's like the manifestation is almost like a side effect of the original reality, which is the concept. That makes me think about, you taught us about before you started talking about the Akan, you taught us about Dogon cosmology and the concept of the creation story beginning with the Nomo.
Yes.
The word. So yeah, that lines up absolutely. I would like for you to talk about the journey with Adasi. You mentioned Adasi a few minutes ago. How not originally, but the intention, as I understand, was to venerate the ancestors who crossed over during the Middle Passage, like a very specific group of people during a specific period of time. And that began, was last year the 20th
25th.
celebration?
So we're approaching
25th.
We're approaching the 26th year now. I know it don't seem.
Take your word for it. That's wild.
Say that again.
25 years ago, this began. Woo,
Now 26 years ago.
26 years ago.
Yes.
And it's coming up again in June. It's always celebrated around the solstice. And now that the Juneteenth celebration has become more universal here, those kind of are starting to coincide. But the intention was to give reverence to the ancestors who crossed over during the Middle Passage. And it has grown from that to us also including our personal ancestors, our many community ancestors who make our experience here so rich. So can you talk about that evolution and just a little about what it is, where it came from? I know that's a lot, but whatever you can share.
I can do that, but I wish, as much as I would love to say I thought it was an original idea, I can't say it actually was. There is Adasi began as an organization in DC, and they may have existed 10 years prior to Adasi Detroit. So I don't know if you remember Mama Tanya, who used to work at Aisha Shule.
Yes.
You remember her? She was the one that
Absolutely.
told me about Adasi probably in around 1990. And she told me it was they did an ancestral commemoration to acknowledge the ancestors lost during the Middle Passage. It's like, this sounds like a really great idea. So it wasn't until 2001, we had our first ceremony in 2001. I can't remember how far ahead I began to plan this. But
I'm so excited about this because of what you were saying earlier about how our expressions were not very spiritual, for lack of a better word. And this was like that I knew of. This is our first opportunity to have an event specifically around spirituality, spiritual expression. We did not have that before. I remember that it was what you call non-denominational. So it was welcoming to all spiritual traditions and religions. And that just really excites me, even in this moment. Like, this was 26 years ago, but I love that so much, and especially knowing what I know now. But I'm sorry, I did cut you off. It was on purpose.
That's okay.
Please continue.
Okay. But I thought we need to do this in Detroit. And I also, there were a lot of different factors. There was definitely a desire to make it inclusive of all spiritual orientations. And in fact, early on, I reached out to Muslims that I knew, Christians that I knew, Yoruba, different people, because I don't think we have to be different. I mean, there's this kind of oppositional idea that, well, if you're not in a traditional religion, and we know there's a lot of negative things associated with these other Judeo-Christian religions, but I wanted it to be inclusive to all people in terms of spirituality. Another motivating factor, I felt like I did not see anything, and this included people I knew that were dealing with the traditional, maybe Yoruba. I didn't know any Ghanaian, any Akan people, but part of the focus was to do something that would speak to the spirit of the community. So I was thinking in the context of what even people that profess to be priests or ministers or whatever, people have their congregations and things like that. But what is being done to feed the whole community spiritually? And also, this was an opportunity to help move our people towards re-embracing a traditional African spiritual practice.
Yes.
So I was thinking about all of these things, and I was fortunate enough I reached out to, I was teaching at the Shule at the time. Uh, I reached out to other teachers, Mama Oya, Mama Lynn. Mama Abba was not a teacher. She was a parent, very active in Saroma. Uh, who did I leave out? Mama Hanifa. Seemed like it was one more person. I hate when I forget like this. So it was Oya, Mama Lynn, Mama Oya, Lynn, Mama Hanifa, Mama Abba. Did I say Dada? So that was the
Nope, you
five.
didn't say.
It was a total of 6 of us. And I presented the
Uh-huh.
idea to them, and they were like, I'm good with it. Let's do it. And we got together and planned it out. It's interesting. We went out to Belle Isle looking around. We spent probably a day just going to different spots on Belle Isle, trying to see what felt right for what we were trying to do. So that's how it started. The first time we did it, of course, we would gather at 6. We used to gather at sunrise. So we would have to be out to Belle Isle maybe at 5 something to be there to try to begin when the sun rose. That was not sustainable. I'm not going to even get into all the reasons for that. Uh, and we had the ceremony in the morning, and then we had another program in the afternoon. And the program in the afternoon, of course, included cultural expression. We had panel discussion on education, the psychological impact of enslavement and things like that. So Mama Imani spoke on education. We had Dr. Bland, Mama Joanne Watson. Uh, I don't know if you remember Dr. Ambaye Ramsey talked about these various things. We had a marketplace. We did that for a few years where we had the program twice, well, 2 different programs in one day. And the plan is we're trying to bring that back this year. We're not going to do an Akan again, but we're trying to do something similar to what we did in the beginning, because to me, it has to be an educational component to this. So, because people have questions,
Yes.
why do we do this? What is the purpose? But the hope and the desire is to try to move people on a path of becoming, I'll say, re-Africanized, for lack of a better word, and to re-garnering and re-embracing some of our spiritual and traditional practices. So over time, uh, those were the 6, including myself. There were 6 of us that founded it. At various points in time, people have kind of gone their own ways, come, maybe not come, or whatever. But myself and Mama Hanifa have sustained it up until this point. We have a couple of people that came on board last year for the 25th that I anticipate will be continuing to participate and plan. And we have attained, this is still evolving, nonprofit status, and that's to include an educational component, so that, okay, we come together. We have other events we do as well. We've done the past couple of years, we've done the Black August program in alliance with other community entities. Last year, we hosted one day at Kwanzaa, and we have also been involved in pouring libations at the Harvest Fest in the fall for decom farms and for their spring opening ceremony. So there's a desire there to expand it, but what's super important is needed is younger people that continue the work. The hope and the idea is this will live beyond those of us that have been at the fore of making this an annual event. I don't know if I answered every part of
Exactly.
the
And I think we'll
question.
also be doing something. Of course, so many questions. But yeah, I think we'll also be doing something with Ancestors Day, which happens in
Oh,
early November.
I
Um,
forgot. I forgot about that. We started to create a collaboration to bring back Ancestors Day in the context that it was introduced and done at Aisha Shule and the broader community. So I'm glad you reminded me of that. So we may need to start planning that now.
So right now, there's much, much work to do, much to create. What would you like more people to understand about what we call death?
Well, I would like, my wish is that people are open to new perceptions of what life and death is. And I don't think you can really understand or an understanding of death, an optimal understanding or an African understanding is that to understand is not separate from life. And as I said earlier, it's a part of a continuum. So we never, something that I say oftentimes when I pour libations in the beginning to help people that may have not experienced the pouring of libations before, when the first human being was created in the Judeo-Christian creation story, what animated that first human being was the breath of God. So if God is at the core of our existence, and I don't know of any religion, there's a lot I don't know, but I can't think of any religion that suggests or ascribes to the idea that you can create or destroy God. So if God is at the core of our existence, then when our physical body when it's dead, or however you want to say it, that energy in us, that spirit, that God, whatever you want to call it, I think the Akan call it the Okra, the life force in us continues to exist. And this goes very well to the idea of ancestor veneration, because we say all the time, we lost a great person. We lost a great leader. But if we are open to rethink how we think about life and death, then we can embrace the idea that they still exist. It's not in the way that we may wish that they did. So I guess the short answer is that what I would like us to consider about death is reconsidering what we've been taught about death and embracing the idea that it's a part of our continued existence.
Agreed. That was supposed to be the last question, but we gain a powerful ancestor when losing a very close loved one. Losing a very close loved one needs to be reframed as gaining a powerful ancestor, and there's a word for that that has slipped my mind. But yes, I so appreciate your perspective, and I hope to continue this conversation. There's so much more that needs to be discussed, so I really appreciate your being here today to begin.
Thank you for having me, and I was going to suggest we may consider doing a follow-up part 2 or whatever. But I think going back to the last question, what was supposed to be the last question, this new way of thinking or being, if we can see it as a challenge to challenge us, because to challenge us to operate differently. I try to explain this, is kind of difficult sometimes, but I have all kind of people that I know or that I anticipate I'm gonna see again. You follow what I'm saying? I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw you until this meeting. So I have all kind of people. I'm not terrified or petrified. Oh, that person is gone. And even though I don't see you, I don't love you any less. You follow? So
it was, by the way, at a homegoing.
Say that, okay.
Last time I saw you with the homegoing.
Well, but I'm saying if I don't see, I have friends I haven't seen in years. And of course, when I see them, I'm glad to see them. But if I think about in this person's absence, I can still love them, revere them, and all these things. I hope that makes sense. But
It does.
and I say sometimes, and I have to be careful about this because people are very sensitive about death and all of this. But I think when a person dies, it can challenge you to love them in a different way.
Agreed. Love remains. Excuse me, Mama Ngia. That always reminds me of her. Love remains. Oh, okay.
Remains
So,
and
Baba,
sustains.
say it again.
I said it remains and it sustains.
And sustains. Word.
But if I,
So,
when
how can
I'm sorry, I'm about to go on. We can come back and do this again.
let's just keep going. I want to just get to how can we contact you to find out more about Adasi and to learn more about ancestral veneration, or if they need some services, or if someone's interested in being your apprentice.
Uh, I would probably say, because I don't have anything prepared right now, the quickest way would be to find me, hit me up on Facebook. I'm not there a lot, but I will respond. My name is Kefense Chike, Kefentse. Last name Chike. You can also reach me at Wayne State at chike@wayne.edu. You can shoot me an email there. And I, people in the, I mean, I'm not hard to find. I don't think people in the community know how to get me in. Just reach out.
Mhm.
But as I get older, they're gonna have a birthday coming up in a few weeks. Uh, what's super important to me, I haven't figured out a way to do this, is there needs to be younger people. This is an issue that we've had in a lot of our institutions that we've created, that we do not, in a very broad way, have a concept of the intergenerational aspect of the struggle and work that we do. So there needs to always continuously be younger people that are going to come up and continue to work. We can look at institutions we've had, I'm not going to name them, but some of our institutions have gone away that were effective, had we had young people that were prepared to step up and take the helm, they would still exist. But regardless of whether they exist or not, the work that we have to do, as you said, there's plenty of work to be done. I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. So I forgot how to say the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So we're not never at a shortage of work to be done, but we need more people to step up and do this work and obtain an understanding of why it's important. The only people that's going to save us is us.
On that note, I keep forgetting that I need a closing for this show. I don't have one, but I'll just edit something in later. But again, thank you so
Okay.
much. I will make sure that the information is down in the description below.
Okay.
And I'll talk to you again soon. Nana, peace and love.